Have you ever tried to pull out a rosemary bush? It's not easy, and could take hours using hand tools. But in this video, I'm going to show you that there is an easier way to do it. If you own a truck with a receiver hitch, purchase a shackle receiver, some chain, and one of two options: a manual cable winch puller, or actually buy an electric winch. I picked this one up for about $70. The purpose of this video is to show you how I built an adapter so I can mount this winch onto that shackle receiver. So instead of hand cranking on a manual winch, this is how it'll work. Get the truck's back end as close to the bush as you can, wrap the chain around the bush, and hook up the winch to the chain.
Alright.
Now, with the simple push of a button, that rosemary bush will be removed. The board is there to keep the chain from ripping apart my rock wall. You want to change out your box sleeve PBs for something else? Piece of cake. And you may find that this even works on small trees. Here's how it works. After you've backed the truck up to the item you're going to pull, install your shackle receiver. Put your adapter in place, open the security door, and install the retaining bolt. The purpose for the security door is just to make sure the bolt doesn't back out. Now we can bolt the winch onto the adapter. Hook up the battery to the winch, and you're good to go. Okay, let's build this adapter. Like most of my projects, my first step was to build a cardboard proof-of-concept prototype. It's a lot easier to cut and shape cardboard than steel, not to mention a lot cheaper if you make a mistake. I'll need to cut out a hole for the main bolt that mounts this adapter onto the shackle, 2 holes that allow me to mount the winch onto the adapter, a slot that goes over the shackle receiver, and maybe throw in a couple holes that you'll be ignoring later. Finally, before you tear this apart, to use each piece of cardboard as a template, mark every edge so you'll be able to reassemble all these parts in the correct orientation. Now, just trace the templates onto your steel so you can cut them out. I want this thing to be pretty heavy duty, so I'm using somewhere around 1/4 inch thick steel. To cut the steel, I'm using my Hypotherm plasma cutter. This uses nothing but electricity and compressed air to create plasma. You know, that's the stuff the sun is made out of. So, needless to say, at those temperatures, this steel melts like butter. You want to plan ahead when you're cutting. If you have inside cuts, make all those before you actually cut the entire part out. Because once the part falls into the water, it's a lot harder to cut it. Here, instead of dulling a drill bit, I simply use the plasma cutter to cut my holes. If you're new to plasma cutting, like I am, it may take 1 or 2 tries to get the hole the right size. Here, we actually see what the steel looks like as the plasma jet cut through it. The solidified molten metal is called slag. It can usually be chipped off pretty easily using a slag hammer. If not, break out your grinder. We finally get to the point where we can start welding these parts together. The red things are magnets that hold 2 pieces of steel at 90 degrees. Before you do any welding, do a fit check to verify all your parts are properly oriented. Every place I plan on welding, I bevel the edges. The reason for this is, as I'm filling that beveled edge up with weld, I'm getting much greater heat penetration into the steel, which should make a better weld. The type of welding I'm doing here is called MIG welding, M-I-G. I believe this stands for metal inert gas. The gas we're using is a carbon dioxide argon mix. It's blown out through the nozzle over the weld that you're making. The purpose is to keep oxygen away from that weld. Oxygen, well, oxidizes, which is a contaminant which makes a very poor weld. Some welding techniques I use is I tack weld the part into place first, verify the metal's properly aligned, then go back and start adding my permanent weld. If you have too much heat build up in one spot, your metal will warp. So that's why I'm doing about an inch of weld seam, then moving to a new spot and welding there while the weld seam cools down a little bit. Notice all the smoke I'm producing is going off to the left. This is because I have a fan blowing across me to try to push all the smoke out through the garage door, and hopefully away from my face. After all the inside welds are complete, I go back and do my outside welds. However, here I'm not going for deep penetration. That was the purpose of the inside weld, so I can run a small bead all the way down. I'm simply filling the bevel that I made in the steel earlier. After all my welding is complete, I clean the project up with a flap disc. This is like heavy-duty sandpaper that works on steel. Notice the dark discoloration along the corner? That's how far in my weld penetrated, so I know this thing's gonna be strong. I then drill a small hole with a drill bit right here. That's where I'm gonna bolt on that little security cover that I'll build later. Clean your project up and paint it, and you're good to go. Well, thanks for watching.